Well, there'll definitely be a slight family connection there. That made me think of, I was watching a TV show one time, and I heard them say, one of the things it said was the introduction is a lot better than the speaker. So I think you just lived through that, experienced it. Now, when Cindy messaged me Friday and asked me, and I know you're listening, Cindy, or watching, so Cindy, thanks, because when you sent that message, it said that went into great detail explaining how God had revealed to her that she was to ask me. But she closed it out with, but it's okay if you don't want to do it. It's okay. It's all right. And I'm thinking, you kind of negated that option when you started out the way you did. So thanks, Cindy. But no, I apologize in advance because I've never really done this. I spent a lot of years in youth ministry related, or acting as youth minister and shadow youth minister and in churches, a couple of churches, but done quite a lot of Wednesday night classes and with youth and KBA classes with youth and devotions and all that, and also taught in our Awana program at that particular church for a long time, 5th and 6th graders. So I say that to say this: if you feel like, and I was also a 5th grade teacher for 26 years, as everybody here knows, but if you feel like I'm treating you like you're a 5th grader or talking to you like you're a 5th grader, probably am. I apologize in advance for that. I'm sorry, but I might try to, pull it up a little bit and act like you're a youth in Wednesday night classes also. I'll do my best. But I was counting in here a while ago the number of my former students. I counted 6, and then 2 Kendrick girls walked in the back. And so I guess now we're at 8. And they can tell you that I sometimes have an issue when I'm talking. I have a little bit of ADHD. And if a squirrel runs by, I'm going to chase that thing. Okay, so I'll try not to, and I promise I wrote down my main stuff, so I'll try to avoid chasing every squirrel that runs through the back of the church, okay? But anyway, when Cindy asked me this Friday night, I was actually on the way to the football game to listen to Caleb, my youngest son, Caleb. He did the prayer, and I was thinking about when she messaged me, I obviously couldn't really say no, so I was thinking about what to say. And it kind of took me back for a moment to an observation I had made a few weeks ago. I think that would kind of rely on or pull in my experience as a youth person, and I was heavily involved in mainstream denomination churches all of my life up until a couple of years ago, and based upon those experiences. And I just I think we were on the way out here that morning or getting ready or something, and I mentioned to my wife, I said, what was the day that we had the dinner day, ate whatever it was. There's my Baptist roots calling it dinner day. The day we went to Salt and had lunch. I kind of look at what's going on around us, and I think, how did we get here? Based on at least my experiences, and a lot of my experiences in life, when you listen to Cindy's, they're very similar to hers. Our upbringing, and I often think that when she's talking, our upbringing, and, they kind of run together in more ways than one, and I won't go into all that, but I will say this: how did we get to where we are? I know for a fact that I personally have spent most of my life working with youth, doing my best to, bring God to them, to help them to let God use me to help them to find God, experience God, better their lives. And sometimes I think, I look around me and think, I know other churches have done the same thing through the years that I've, worked in close conjunction with in this area. It looks like we might have been miserable failures as I look around us. I'm like, what has happened? And that same day, after services, Cindy sat down by me, and I kind of shared that same thing with her. I was like, somebody walked up, we didn't get to carry on the conversation, but I did share that with her, and I was like, I'm just a little, it's kind of confusing. But as I've thought about that, okay, and remember, I'm going to be drawing back on my experiences an awful lot here, and this is a new thing for me, so I don't have a problem talking, but it's a new thing for me to actually do a Sunday morning service. But, think about how we approach ministering to others. You could take this, we can go as a church, we can go as a community, we can go as whatever, however you want to take it, as a society, a country, whatever. Think about how we go about that. Sometimes I wonder if we are really being productive in that. I look at the results and I really wonder if we're being productive. And I think, to me, what God has kind of showed me since I started coming here probably 2 to 3 years ago is that, and I've listened to Cindy talk about this numerous times, maybe our approach is a little off, especially in mainstream churches. I'm sure you like me have done this. You drove through a town, been on vacation on a Sunday morning or whatever, and drove through a town, and you can look at the cars in the parking lots of churches. You can you can figure a lot out by looking at that. And it makes you think, especially in certain situations, not trying to point fingers at anybody here, but we may not be getting our message out there. And I think a lot of it is in the presentation of it. And basically, hey, let me back up and say this. Sin is sin. We all know that, okay? We all get that. You cannot run from that fact, and that's not what I'm sitting here saying. I'm not saying sin is not sin because sin is sin. The Bible's clear on that. But sometimes I think when you kind of analyze the love versus condemning spirit, how do we approach people? How do we minister to people? Are we showing love or are we showing condemnation? How do we do this? What direction are we going? In our society today, unfortunately, it appears to me this may be from mainstream Christianity, may be becoming more of an issue. But think about this. I Googled this and went to Google. Great source, but I Googled love. Love is the key. And it told me love is the key element of Christian love. Which makes sense. Love is the key element of Christian love. Okay. Something I didn't realize that I learned, and I Googled 2 or 3 times, and I went back and researched this further. The fact that God is love is only mentioned twice in the New Testament. I did not realize that. 1 John 4:8 and 1 John 4:16 both say that. But say God is love. So the Apostle John obviously was referring that fact to us, which wouldn't want to overlook that. Think about condemnation. Think about what that is. Okay, when I Googled it, once again, it says judgment that comes from breaking God's law, declaring someone guilty, and dooming them was the word it used, dooming them to punishment. Thought about that as I was doing this last night. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I'll tell you that now. But as I was working on this last night, I thought about that. How often can I, as a Christian, doom someone to punishment? Is that my job? Just go turn the TV on and watch what's going on around us. It is not my job as a Christian. I can't doom someone. That's God. But are we doing that? Think about that. Are we doing that as Christians? And how is that affecting our ministry, basically? It's obviously, we all know it's not working out. There's some issues there. I'll just leave it with that. But so that took me a step further. I thought, I'm going to look at the synonyms of condemnation. Damnation was the first one that popped up. Punishment, destruction, and I can't read my last one, but anyway, you get the point. What I'm saying. Can't read my writing, but think about that. And then there was also a list of things that popped up that God condemns. Okay, I didn't write that down. I read over it, but it's the normal things that we're all well aware of. But think about that. How often, as Christians, do we approach in love, or do we condemn people? Once again, sin is sin. I don't want anybody thinking that that I'm up here saying that, sin's not sin, because it is. But think about how we approach others. The Great Commission tells us what we have to do. It doesn't tell us really how to do it. It leaves it wide open. We have to interpret that, make our own decisions, and decide what's best for our situation, which we would do. But, it leads me back to the question. How did we as a society get to where we are as far as our Christianity? And you also have to look at where we're going to be without some changes in how we handle things. I don't think this I think we have the concept of foreign missions down. Once again, my Baptist roots will come through. I think we have the concept of foreign missions down. I think we have that. I think we have that covered. But I think where we're weak, where we may well be weak, it's not my place to say we are or we aren't. I think where we may well be weak and have some issues would be in our local community, state, county, however you want to break that down. And think about how we represent, our churches, how we as Christians, how our society, how Christians in general, how do we represent God to our neighbors? That's what really counts, is what we do in our day-to-day lives. How do we represent God to our neighbors? Are we condemning them? Are we running around? Your Cindy brings this up a lot. Just let them do whatever they're doing. They're going, that's their deal. They'll be accountable to that. And I've made that same statement myself a lot too. I've made that same statement. Still do, but I realize now that that's not what I should be doing. But how many times have we, in our lives, do we do that? Do we say that, hey, they'll get what's coming to them? They deserved it. They earned it. It's theirs, And that's really a bad way to look at things. And as I've been watching things play out the last few months, I honestly just kind of sends chills up and down my spine at times at some of the things I've heard said. Now think about this. Think about the results we're getting. Is Christianity, godliness, the gospel, is that spreading through our town? Let's just isolate it and bring it down to Wilburton, Let's bring it down to Wilburton. Is the gospel being spread effectively in Wilburton, Oklahoma? Think about that. Or Oklahoma. And we all bear some responsibility for that. Go back and read the Great Commission. It's there. We all bear responsibility for that. We have to. We can't avoid that in any way. And also know that like I said, sin is sin. I want to make sure that I don't come across as saying it's not, because I'm not trying to say that. And I also know that since creation, God has us headed down a certain path. I know what the Bible says, very familiar with it. I know all about it, the rapture and all that. And I know everything's going to happen. And I know we're headed toward that. I know that since Adam and Eve, we've been headed to a certain destination, and we're headed to that destination as humanity. I know that. But what I'm looking at here is where we are in our small time frame. Okay? We all have a role in the time that God put us here. I do believe that. I believe we all have a role, and we all have an important role. I do think that. And I'm just more interested in looking and analyzing and thinking about that role that we have in that small sliver. When you look at the overall time, I just recently, 2 years ago, lost my, I'm 50-something years old. And, I was lucky when I had a grandparent 2 or 3 years ago. She was 99 when she passed away, but I had a grandparent who was a very avid Christian, who left a legacy for me, okay? But taught the same Sunday school class for, 50 years maybe, something like that. I'm sure the last few years were not too productive. But anyway, she did teach it for many, many years. And, they had, our ancestors had their time. We have our time. And I hope I would love to be able to see us as Christians now maybe leave things better than we're leaving. I mean, I think we could. So far, I'm able to stick with my topics, guys. There's not any squirrels running back there, thankfully. As Brian Lawrence walked past me a while ago, he said, "This should be interesting." And I'm like, "Yeah, Brian, it should be." He knows me too well. But, you know, and I do think that as far as people that go out into the world, other countries, things like that, I don't really think that's what I'm talking about here. I think I know it's not. I have no experience there. I can't speak for that. I've heard plenty of them talk at church camp, youth camp, and I really can't speak for that, but I do think that we have that pegged, more closely. Okay, think about the differences we can make in life by loving others and not condemning. God will take care of the condemning. God will take care of that. That's God's job, not ours. We've made it our job. We have took that role on. At least that's the way it appears to me. We, and I don't mean us, but I mean Christianity as a whole in this country. We've took that role on, and we've suffered the consequences of that, and we'll continue to do so, I believe. And think about this love versus condemnation. In my many years in an area church, 2 area churches actually, I have done many things, but the vast majority of the things I did revolved around the youth program. A lot of youth ministry activities. I've done hundreds of, devotions and a lot of things. A lot of youth trips. A lot of church camps. 2019 was my last year, and I decided that was enough. I was too old for that. But the previous 20 years, I hadn't missed over a couple. Our church's cabin, running the cabin. But in my experience, and that's all I have to draw on, I don't really have anything else to draw on, is in the youth field. I've seen so many times that the way things play out in church, that kids come, kids go. I think we probably see it here. Kids come, kids go. Kids come in, sometimes families come in. I've seen a few cases where, it's worked very well. Families are still there. But in the Awana program, very productive. If you're familiar with that at all, it's a non-denominational program, but it's very productive. It does bring families in. And normally those families stay, in my experience. But beyond that, I had to, as I was talking about this, thinking about this, reading about this last night, kind of planning it, made me think of an experience I had in that capacity. And that experience was, we had this family coming in. The kids started coming. Several of us worked on them. This has been quite a few years back. Several of us worked on getting the family, the kid there, the boy there, and we did. He started coming, took him to church camp. And after church camp, the family started coming, okay? Very much an unchurched family, but the family started coming. And I even had the family, we were working on a certain ministry area. We were focusing on a certain activity at that point, had the mother helping. She was coming in to help us. And I'm going to use this story to tie into, sometimes I think we have a lot of, my experience has shown me, once again, not criticizing anyone, not being critical, not trying to be critical. But we do have a lot, today's world, of what I call the no sermons. No. You can title them no. That's all you have to say. The word is no. And basically what those are, many in here, I'm sure you can all identify with me. Many of them in here, and we don't hear these. We don't hear these here. Okay, we do not. But many of them, churches you hear, this is bad. This is bad. Week after week, this is bad. This is bad. Yada, yada, yada. And normally those are on a few specific sins, okay, which are sins. But they seem to, based on my experience, to recycle. They go week to week. Not long, they come back. Well, as you can probably see where I'm going with this one, see where I'm headed with this one. The family was there for one of these, what I would call a no sermon. Leave it at that. It was a no sermon. No, 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 don't do this, don't do this. God's love was never sprinkled in that sermon, as they normally aren't in those particular types. Normally those sermons, and if you're involved in mainstream denominations, I know this, the sermons were coming from talking points that were being passed down from above, and I don't mean from God either, okay? That's not where they were coming from. They were being passed down, and those topics were covered pretty well. And this family happened to have, who'd been coming for a while, they happened to have an older child living in one of living in one of these sins that these no sermons are about, and definitely living in sin. Okay. And sure enough, following week I get a phone call after I was sitting there that morning. I'll never forget thinking, oh no, where's this going? Please no, don't let this happen. But it did happen. So they went on their way that day. Everybody did. And that week, I get a phone call from the mom, like, hey, I won't be able to come do, what I was going to do Wednesday for you to help out. So what's up? And, we're not coming back. I was like, okay. And this was a call that was not unexpected, okay. And she said, we're not coming back. And I said, okay. I said, can I ask why you're not coming back? Well, I was told I have to hate my son. That's what he stood up there and said. And I was like, I think you took it the wrong way, but it was hard for me to defend. I remember as I tried to defend that and tried to spin that around, I sounded like, like I sounded lost, because it was very difficult to defend. And I'm still not sure how you would defend that. I mean, I heard the same sermon. And the only problem with that was God's love was left out. It was not mentioned. God's love was left totally out of the picture. That was not discussed. So just an example of where these things can lead to. And I really want us to think about this. This is something that I've really thought about a lot. It's really been on my mind for a couple. And Cindy told me when she messaged me, I messaged her back and I said, hey, what exactly do you want me to talk about? And she said, well, whatever's on your heart. You'll figure it out because God picked you to speak today. Like, okay. So this is all I could come up with. It's the one thing that's been on my mind for a while and bothered me as I've watched things unfold around me the last few years especially. But you look at John 3:16, 3:17, it talks about, we're all very familiar verses to us all, but you look at specifically John 3:17, it talks about God sent his son to save the world, not condemn the world. To me, that right there, that particular verse, as I was looking for verses to back this up, and I was not able to really back it up like I wanted to, and I apologize for that, but I felt strong enough about it that I did find that verse. And it does tell us that, it tells us, as we all know, John 3:16, but John 3:17, when you read on, take it in context, does say that God sent his son not to condemn the world, but to love the world. Think about how we treat people. Think about what we do. Think about, I think Cindy said this before, I think everything goes down to, or comes down to, basically, we in a small church, small town, can make a difference. We can make a difference. And that's all I have. How do you want to close this out, Kara? I didn't ask this. Okay. All right. Well, hey, I apologize for, hope it wasn't too bad. Hope it wasn't too bad. I was proud of myself. I didn't see any squirrels go through the back. I really have a problem with that. And random thoughts just come out, just, they're gone. I have an issue, if you know me, with whatever comes into my mind usually comes out. So anyway, let's make, I appreciate you guys listening. Actually, my wife asked me earlier if I was nervous. I said, nah, talking never makes me nervous. I can talk all day. But anyway, I'll close and we'll be finished. Father God, we come before you, Lord, thankful for this day you've given us, Father, thankful for this lesson you've led us to receive, Father. And I just lift this church and Pray that you'd be with us, as all of us, as we travel out into the world, and help us to spread your love to others. And Father, I just lift Earl up to you in prayer. Pray that you'd be with him, continue to heal him, be with his doctors and nurses as they deal with him, Father. And I just thank you for your many blessings on us. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.